up, what's up, what's up, what's up, what's up?
The goodest night, right about the hood.
What up, what up, what up?
No means no, and yes means no.
What up, what up, what up? I'm already needing a drink. What up, what up, what up? Oh, dear God. What up, what up, what up, what up? It's me, L-Teddy27. What up, what up, what up, what up, what up? What's good? What is up? What is up, people? What's up? It's me, L-Teddy27, and I am back for yet another review. This is going to be our review for David Makes Man. It is season 2. It is episode 2. Shouts out to all my Deuce Clubs out there. It is entitled Hurston. So this is the episode where we go back to the young kids and we learn more about, get more background information of the stuff that happened between season 1 and the time jump that we have in season 2. So we travel back to Hurston when David was in high school, and David is in 10th grade now. So he has a year under his belt. He's had a little bit of time to get adjusted and acclimated and have his little growing pains with being at a school like Hurston, which is a boarding school where they stay on campus. They live on campus. It's an all-boys school. They live on campus and so forth. And so at the beginning of the episode, though, we have old David. He's waking up once again like clockwork at 3:28. Something's going to come up at 3:28 a.m. We'll find out. But anyway, so you hear him having all of these thoughts and recollections of, things that happened while he was in high school, and even some current things, like, JG said, I'm going to the Ville, why don't you come with me, and all of that stuff before JG gets shot. So we have David, flashes back to when he was in high school. And then we see a young David is on the campus of Hurston. He's racing these 3 white guys. And I'm going to say white presenting, because here's a dichotomy of living in Miami that by living there. In Miami, especially with the Cuban population, if they're white presenting Cubans, you can automatically consider them to be white, because in their estimation they are. By them being white presenting, they want no parts of any alignment with black people or any other people of color. Let them tell it, they are just as white as the people descended from the Caucasus Mountains. And if you go over to Cuba, you will see Afro-Latinos and Afro-Cubans that look darker than me. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. Anyway, so although I think one of the characters involved, his name is Ronaldo, I think they said his name is Perez. So I'm going to call him Perez. But anyway, he's white presenting. And I can assure you that none of, his experiences align itself to anything to deal with people of color rather than with people descended from the Caucasus Mountains. So keep that in mind. So when I say white boy, I'm using that term loosely because we're discussing these 3 guys. Then we have his roommate, whose name is Luis. Now, the roommate is Cuban also, but his family lives in Hialeah, so they aren't as affluent as the other 3. However, he did tell me his mom is a lawyer, so y'all ain't doing too bad out there in Hialeah. Anyway, Hialeah is certainly not, and Hialeah is nowhere near hood not, where you can't, have very much middle class to upper middle class. Anyway, a little bit about, living in Miami. So David ends up beating them. He's faster than them and so forth. And it is refreshing to see young David. No disrespect to Kwame Patterson, because I think he's doing a yeoman's job of playing David in his 30s. But this is the David that we have all come to love. The Achille McDowell version of David. The smile, the way he presents himself, just everything about this David, you're like, yeah, this is what we fell in love with. So we see the 5 of them there in the cafeteria, and there's this another one of their classmates walks by, and the guy Perez, he did something to him. I don't remember exactly the motion or gesture, what he said to him, but it was kind of in the mode of trying to let him know, listen, I ain't with that gay shit. And it was because from the beginning of this episode, I kept thinking that this Perez character, as well as David's roommate Luis, I wrote down in my notes, they seem like closeted teenagers in their approach. They have different approaches though.
The Perez guy approaches it with by trying to do everything to fight off someone gay, to have homophobic slurs, to be, super, masculine and not gay presenting. Luis, on the other hand, approaches it in a different manner. Still doesn't want to necessarily be attributed to it, but wants to take it from the notion of, well, if I'm comfortable in who I am, then you won't think that I am gay. And so they just have two different approaches. Anyway, we hear about Saren because David tells them, listen, I had a not roommate, my best friend in middle school, I think was gay, and there was no problem. He listen, I don't have no problem with gay people. I don't have no problem with nothing. That was my best friend. He had my back. And so that's when the roommate chimes in, yeah, that's all that should matter. He had my back. He had your back. And so the Perez guy continues to make all his homophobic statements and gestures and, Anyway, so we see them on their way to class. In English class. And the English teacher is talking about Shakespeare and Hamlet and so forth. And she goes through her class and whatnot. So there's this moment where David gets up and starts reciting Shakespeare. And he's exceptional. And I wrote down, he has to be. When you are the one of the few black students in a school that is predominantly white, you have to be exceptional. You have to be that much better. There's an expectation, because just as much of our parents and grandparents a lot of times taught us that we have to be 3 or 4 times better in order to be accepted. Please don't think that the people on the other side, the white people, don't have the same expectations that, yeah, you better be 4 or 5 times better than your white counterparts in order for us to even allow you in this space. So it comes from both sides. So, and I wrote down he was exceptional. He did everything that a teacher would want a student to do in that moment. But David doesn't have a choice. David has to be exceptional in order to even stay at the school. So we saw that, and it really made me think about, I've been in that space where I've had to be that guy. We then see David and his roommate sleep, and David wakes up, the bed is wet. Now, I don't know if this was him waking up with the night sweats or if it was a wet dream. Him and the roommate talked about it being a wet dream. David never confirmed that it was. He just allowed his roommate to go with that narrative. And part of me thinks that he allowed his roommate to go with that narrative because the roommate would understand that, and it means that he wouldn't have to explain the mental issues that he's dealing with and go into detail about some of the trauma and anguish and mental anguish that is causing him to have these night sweats and so forth. So he tries to get up and change the sheets inconspicuously, but the roommate catches him, and he gives David advice on how he deals with wet dreams by, wrapping himself in 2 towels so he's always ready. You don't have to get ready. As an adolescent, you deal with wet dreams. They are a part of life. Hell, you're a grown man and you don't relieve yourself, your body will have one. So it is what it is. Anyway, we find out also that the roommate just got to Hurston that year. He wasn't there freshman year. He transferred from another school. And they talk about this math test and the fact that David's calculator is broken, so the roommate offers to give him his one and let him borrow it for the math test or whatnot. And so he tells David, make sure you keep it charged because it loses charge real fast. And so David was like, yeah, I got it. So when they get to the math test, of course, exactly what you think happens. The battery runs out of the charger. David's frustrated. He goes to ask the teacher, hey, my calculator died, can I charge it? And the teacher here looks at him and says, it's always something with you. And I wrote down, oftentimes, black students and sometimes other students of color, the teacher always makes it seem like you're bothering them, as if just asking them a question or just, interrupting their whatever they were doing is just so bothersome, and you're always bothering them, and that you're always like a charity. Like then they try to make you feel bad, like you're this charity case that's getting on their nerves. Just completely ignoring the fact that these students oftentimes start 5 steps behind because the playing field is not equitable, certainly not on the financial side. And so you have these expectations of this young man that he's going to be able to do all of the things that his classmates do who come from, a lot of money, and he doesn't. You can't just nilly-willy say, I'm buying me a graphing calculator at the drop of a dime when it costs $300-400. So she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing as a teacher, and now she makes him feel like he's bothering her. He's standing in front of the class, everybody's staring at him, and now there's just this awkward feeling, and now the rest of the class is looking at him like he's ostracized now. He's looked at like he's some charity case, like people are supposed to feel bad for him, or as if he's getting certain exceptions that the other students don't get, and that's not fair to him. It's not fair at all. But that is such as the case a lot of times in these instances. After that, we see David at the library. He's working in the library. I'm sure this probably was a requirement for maybe the scholarship that he has, where he has to do, some work around campus. And so he works in the library. He has on these raggedy earphones that's all taped up and stuff. And the roommate comes and kind of interrupts him. And I wrote down that either one or two things is happening with Luis, or the actor that's playing the roommate. Either one, it's clear that the character Luis has a thing for David, and I do mean erogenously, meaning he likes David like that, not just as a friend, more than a friend. Or the actor that plays Luis is just doing bad acting. It was one of two things. Either this is someone who really is enamored with David, likes David. I'm not going to say in love with David, but in like with David. Or it was just not good acting in a lot of instances from that actor. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Anyway, the roommate tells David all about this prank that they got to go do, the class prank or whatnot. And David tells him about this book of poetry that he got from Sky. And the roommate tells him, next time you go home, bring it so I can read it or whatever. So they decide, he talks to David into going to help out with this prank. So David meets up with his friends, and I'm using that term loosely, and they're discussing ideas about what to do for the prank. So the Perez guy has this idea about setting the pool on fire. And so David says, introduces, the police might get involved, this, that, and the third, ... And so I wrote that eventually they come to the conclusion. David comes to up with this idea to do something else, but he makes Perez feel like it's his idea, or is it Perez is the mastermind in it. And I wrote down that oftentimes you see students that are the token, they're the only one there, end up having to reduce themselves and reduce who they are in order to make their white counterparts feel good, or in order to satisfy the egos of their white counterparts, so that they don't feel some type of way. It happens more often than you think, and that's unfortunate. That is so unfortunate that you got, in order to coax and satisfy the ego of these white students, you got to diminish who you are and your greatness so that their mediocrity can shine through. A mess. Anyway, so down to the pool. They go down to the pool to pull off this prank where they spell out class of 2012 in the bottom of the pool, and they put some purple dye in the water or whatever. And so it's at this point they get everything that everybody talk about, how they love David. Oh, David. Oh, what did we do without you? We're so glad you're here. You knew. After seeing all of that, yeah, it's about to be downhill from here. So they go to this field trip. And I noticed at the beginning of this field trip, both with David and to a certain degree with Marissa, there becomes this expectation that Black students and the students of color, when they're in these predominantly white environments, like I said, I've been there, did that, done that, got the shirt to show for it. You're always expected to have a certain decorum about you, always be poised, well put together, never caught, just enjoying life. You always got to be, on the straight and narrow, having it together, always thinking about, okay, who's watching, ... Whereas your white counterparts can just be loosey-goosey. They can enjoy themselves, have fun, be free, cool, calm, and collected, and you're never given that opportunity. And I noticed that when the guy slaps David in the back of the head, and David turns around, and the black male teacher says, hey, are you focused? Nothing to the white boy. Even Marissa, she stays on, she stays on the straight and narrow. So when the little white boy tried to play with her, she kept it, hey, don't play with me. I don't play with you. Don't play with me. So I, it reminds me of how a lot of times some of our students and children get robbed of just being a kid and being a child and just being able to just be free. And you're robbed of that. And that's so unfortunate. Anyway, David sees Marissa and the boys coax him into going over there and talking to Marissa because they think Marissa's cute. And David's over there talking to Marissa, and they're doing all of these horrible gestures and awkward motions. And Marissa figures out that they sent him over there to talk to her. She gets upset. She does mention that she went to Mass Academy. Mass Academy is the high school in Miami for marine science. And their focus is on marine sciences. Anyway, it's called Mass Academy. It's like across the street from the Miami Aquarium. Anyway, she reminds David of Saren. And David, talks about the fact that he loves Saren and almost let it slip that he's one of the people that helped Saren escape. And she was like, look like you didn't have a hard time trying to find a replacement for Saren. And it took me back. I'm almost there, y'all. I told you I'm going to give y'all 3 episodes before I start on my Where's Saren tip. But I ain't there yet. So we're going to see if they give us Saren. Anyway, and so David goes back over there after Marissa kind of berated him or whatever. So then we see everybody's going home for the weekend or something like that. I think it's an extended or long weekend. Everybody's going home. So roommate is going home. David's not going home. He's staying on campus, but he helps his roommate out to the dad's car. And so David's holding the roommate's bag, and as they begin to approach the roommate tries to grab his bag from David, and David is like, no, I got it. And the roommate was like, no, let me hold it. And David just holds on to it. So when they get up to the dad starts talking to, talking to David in Spanish. And I know a little bit of Spanish from living in Miami a little bit, for all my life, And from what I could make out, the dad said, who is this N-word that you brought out here? And roommate says, oh, just one of my friends that, not one of my friends, just somebody who I have classes with. Tries to, write it off as, oh, that's not my friend. He told him, he didn't say my friend. He said, just somebody I have classes with. And unbeknownst to both of them, David speaks Spanish. And David speaks to them in Spanish and says, y'all have a good afternoon or whatever. And the dad is, dumbfounded, like, wait, he speaks Spanish? And this is pretty common. So often you will see, that's why I talked about the white presenting Hispanics or Latinos in Miami, especially those of Cuban descent. They will often go into these long tirades speaking in Spanish, thinking that you don't know what they're saying. And they will be going in and letting have and saying all kinds of horrible things about you, not knowing that you could very well speak Spanish, negating or forgetting the fact that there's a whole contingency of the Latinx population that are Afro-Latino and that are darker than me. That's a whole different story, though. That's where they have begun to don their mantle of white privilege and breastplate of white supremacy, none of which they all have ownership of. Anyway, David walks back to his dorm to his room and starts to realize that maybe these aren't his real friends. And so we had that whole thing. So after the whole weekend break, they're back in the cafeteria. The boys are in the cafeteria. The roommate asks David, are we good? And David's like, yeah, we good. And, leaves it at that. And then, cause he kind of brushes it off. And then they start to talk about the Shakespeare, how David picked up the Shakespeare, and they talked about the iambic pentameter, and how it's kind of like rap. It's a rhythm, and if you can get the rhythm, you'll learn it. And so they start doing this freestyle thing, and the Perez guy just starts using N-word here, there. And David lets it go at the beginning, but eventually he's N-word, and David gets mad and stands up and is angry, demonstratively angry. And he calls David the N-word again. Now what we later find out is Perez is drunk. Okay? So Perez ends up, because Perez feels like David is punking him by standing up and balling up his fist and being confrontational, Perez pushes David, to which David clubs him, like right in the face, bam. And they get in trouble. They go see the administrator. The administrator throws everything on David. Screw the fact that the guy done used the N-word several times. Screw the fact that even that he put his hands on David and pushed David first after using the N-word. Now let's go back. So I tell you that this young man, white presenting, not only called me the N-word, he also pushed me, meaning he put his hands on me, and I'm supposed to just sit there and allow this to happen and not retaliate in self-defense. Tell me how that works. Because non-violent retaliation in instances like that have ended in the death of millions of black people in the history of this country. But administrator goes on and on and on about it, and says, "Oh, I hear that word used all the time here." He tries to stall. He said the book answer, the answer that they have written down. Oh, Hurston does not accept any of those types of words, and da 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 da, and all of the right language. But then goes on to say, "But I hear that word used all the time, and isn't that your friends? And I've heard you and your roommate use it all the time. So why is it so bad now?" I thought this was an institution that didn't allow these types of epithets and all types of bigoted language, but now it's okay because the inmates are running the asylum. Anyway, I also noticed that he never really asked white boy Perez any questions. He was like, "Are you okay? You sure you don't need to see the nurse? Because you need to make sure you don't have any head injuries." Almost as if he's coaching him on, yeah, say you have a head injury so we can make this worse than it already is. That's what I took from that. He didn't have to answer no questions. Administrator had no smoke for him. None. Except for, "Oh, your father would be disappointed." But all white boy had to do was sit there and just be silent, and everything was good. David is given the third degree. And so, did anybody else notice how they were panning? The camera kept panning when they would pan over to the administrator. They always made it a point to show this. I don't know if he was black or Hispanic, but the security guard behind him. And there were times where you could see David kind of looks over there looks at this, what's either black or Hispanic guy, and said, "You ain't gonna help me? You don't see nothing wrong with this?" He don't have nothing for you, David. He lets everything go on. And when David was told he was gonna be suspended, he got to get upset. And he stood up, kind of like angry. And as soon as David showed the slightest bit of anger, that security guard, now you want to step in, because now if you have to, you're gonna forcefully, make sure David falls in line, even if that means by force. I noticed that. I don't know if y'all noticed that. Y'all put in the comment section if y'all noticed that too. But David gonna be suspended for a week. Okay, so David in the room packing to go home. Roommate comes and says, "Oh, what happened?" Da, da, da. David is incensed at this point. He is livid. David says, "Oh, now you want to talk? Where was all of this talk? Where was you having my back when he over here calling me the N-word?" "Oh, but I forgot." "It's okay because your daddy called me that too." Maybe I was here for it. The roommate kept trying to call David D. And he was like, "My name is David." And you see this a lot too, this patronizing of the token black person, where now they want to call you all of those slang terms. And there's this cultural misappropriation. But every time I talk to you, I'm expecting for you to validate the fact that I now can use certain language. And I have a black card because I have a black friend. And that lets me use all culturally misappropriate everything you all have going on. And use words like the N-words, like all of that came oozing through. And there are some of us that are not okay with it. Hell, there are some of us that ain't okay with it with black people, much less with somebody who's not black. Anyway, so David checks roommate and says, "My name is David. Don't try and come over here like we friends now." And he leaves. Back at the Ville, David is walking up and he sees what he thinks is a confrontation between JG and some of the thugs. And it's not. They just playing around. So the thugs go over there and greet David. They're like, "Why you here?" Dot, 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 dot. We learned that they tell him how David, how Shinobi and Raina shut down the drugs that was being sold there, and and all of that. Even though I thought Shinobi was dead, but I think y'all kept correcting me in the comments and said Shinobi wasn't dead. But maybe I just need to go back and watch episode 10 to remember. Anyway, David talks about why he's there and how he had to go off on some white boy. They made him feel bad for, like, really? You went all the way to boarding school, prep school or whatever, to be fighting white boys. To be fighting that shit, you could have stayed there for that. And I was kind of glad that they did that. That they checked David like, "Nah, bro, you made it out, and you over here trying to do this same foolishness." I was here for it. We see Shella, and we find out Shella done started her YouTube page, honey. She just getting started, but she done started her YouTube page, honey. I was here for it. Shouts out to you. This is YouTube. Anyway, when David gets in the house, he finds out that Glow done moved some little boy in there, some boy that Miss Elijah was, helping out. And she done moved some boy in there for a couple months or whatever. Now, I saw David look down at the shoes. Now, I don't know if he looked down at the boy's slides because those are his slides or that the boy was just real comfortable. But David looked at the boy's slides. The boy knew who David was. Anyway, we find Glow tells David they're about to move out to, they soon about to move out of the Ville. And David was like, what was you going to tell me? She was like, I was going to tell you. We also, David also then tells Glow about his suspension, why he got suspended. And Gloria at first was about to go into old Gloria and go off, and she took a breath. And if you look at JG on the side, JG was on the side like, oh boy, here we go. And she calmed down, she got her bearings, and she said, I believe you. It's cool. And David's looking like, what bizarre world am I in? And JG is over there like, yeah, bro, this is the way it is now. And she she's like, listen, I'm late for class. So we find out she's taking classes. I gotta go. JG, I'll be home at such and such time. Make sure you have your homework done. And JG is starting to, act better now. And so that was good to see. And then, so David goes in his room to go look for the book and can't find it. So JG feels him in like, JG feels David in on everything that's going on. Like, listen, mama gave away a lot of our stuff. She treating us like we white people, rich white people, and we not just giving away stuff as if we don't need it. And he feels David in on everything that's going on with Glow, her progress, the fact that she's doing better, she's not on drugs, she's not staying idle, she's finding things to do, and she's getting much better, and so forth. So then they have this conversation about JG getting on hard, and I was glad because, a conversation like that is not a conversation that you should be having with your mama, because your mama don't know what to do with a penis. She don't got one. That's a conversation you got to have with your big brother, your big cousin, your uncle, or some other man, somebody else with a Y chromosome, so that they can tell you what to do with it. Because that's one of the first lessons you learn. Flip and tuck. Flip and tuck is the first lesson you learn, because you be in class and there's no such animal as, oh, keep control of yourself. That thing have a mind of its own. It do whatever it want. So I was glad to see that type of conversation between something that two brothers can only have, and it goes back to reinforce the relationship between David and JG, as well as let each of them know how much they need each other. I was very glad to see that. So we then see David goes back to Galveston. Is it Galveston or Galvin? He goes back to his middle school to try and see Dr. Woodstrap and finds out that she don't retire, but he did get her email. So he sends her an email telling her about what happened with the guy using the N-word. He got suspended, and he says, I hope you understand why I did it. She came right out and sent him a reply, called him a scholar, future scholar, and came right out, no, I don't understand. I don't have no understanding. This conversation Dr. Woodstrap had with David was great. Loved it. It was moving. It was powerful. It was exactly what he needed to hear. Hey, boo, you signed up for this. You thought you was going to go to this school with all white people and you weren't going to deal with racism? Hello? This is what you signed up for. No, I don't have no understanding, because you were supposed to learn to control your temper by now. If you thought that it was going to get any better, you're dreaming. And she held his foot to the fire. Love you to death, boo, but you're wrong. And you better learn to deal with it. And she said something so powerful. She said, listen, she says, you're going to find out that your friends won't be there, or they'll be there with a smile and knives between their teeth. Meaning, them not your friends. And, just reiterated, you signed up for this. Yeah, we're in the 21st century, and racism may be a little more subtle, but it's still there. It ain't going nowhere. Deal with it. This is a part of what you deal with going to a school that's predominantly white. Get over it. Loved it. Powerful message. Needed to be said. Has been said over and over and over in different iterations for generations. So we then see David returns to school. The roommate apologized to David. And David goes through this whole thing where, when you're young, you do have a tendency to be more apt to just accept an apology and try to move on and mend fences. Whereas, us old people, all of that y'all done did, the first time y'all did something, that would have been it. Ain't nothing we need to talk about. But being young, he did. Him and the roommate start to talk, and the roommate apologizes and stuff like that. They talk about this shared experience, both coming, being, students that weren't coming from money. And they talked about how the other three guys in the group are different from them, and that makes them, the two of them, unique. So the other three guys, the roommate also talked about how his dad was wrong, and his dad can be kind of bigoted and racist, and how his grandmother would check his dad and say, listen, a lot of our family is, black as well, or Afro Latino. And so there was that conversation. So David opens up that he couldn't find the book, but also opens up about Sky and Sky's death and how it caused him some mental duress and how he was dealing with that death and how much it bothered him. And the roommate says, I don't remember the exact word, but he said, I won't leave you, or you can't get rid of me, or something to that effect. So then the three stooges come in, the other three guys, the three white presenting guys. And David is thanked by Perez, white boy Perez, thanked David for not snitching on him about being drunk or whatnot, and said that he would have had to go to rehab again. And all of this, that, and the third, there's no acknowledgement of David's feeling. No acknowledgement that this boy had to go on a whole suspension because he got kicked out of school. Nothing. There's just the usual. And what's the usual? It's the usual that the token black child now has to do everything he can to coddle the white boy, coax his little ego, coax all of his feelings and all the anguish that he had to go through. All the while, nobody addresses anything that this black student has had to go through, or his needs, or whatever. Only thing we care about is the needs and issues of this white child. A mess. A whole mess. So we see them down to the pool. They're discussing. And I should say David, coalesced and, forgave them and moved on. So now they're down to the pool and they are talking about the project. I should mention, and if you watched, you should know, the character, Kelly McDowell, talked about having to learn. He did not know how to swim. He had to take swimming lessons for this episode to learn how to swim. And so when earlier in the episode, when they were in the pool doing the prank, David talked about how he didn't like to feel panic, and talked about, he started off by saying he couldn't tread water as well as the rest of the boys, and he talked about not liking to feel panicked or be in a state of panic, I believe it was. Anyway, so now we down to the pool. They're discussing the Shakespeare project, and David done assigned roles to everybody depending on who he thought would do the best. And so he talked about how they did this in middle school, and Marissa helping them do it. And the boys started talking about Marissa negatively and talked about how David, started making gestures and stuff about how David would, be banging out Marissa because that's his girlfriend. And they were like, no, it wasn't just her, and stop talking about her. Saren was in it too. And so Perez calls Saren the F-bomb. And David jumps up, angry again, fists clenched, ready to go. And the roommate tried to defend David, but then Perez tried to make the roommate feel bad and say, oh, well, y'all must be doing something together. That's why we always hear y'all giggling and stuff in y'all room. And so now he told the roommate that he must be David's replacement for Saren. And so now the roommate got the flex and all of this stuff. And so the roommate turns on David. And then Perez lets it be known that the roommate told Perez that David has wet dreams. And David was like, well, he told me he have them too. He have to wrap 2 towels around him. And the roommate and David turned on each other. And the roommate, David mentions, you just as racist as your dad. And the roommate said, at least I got a dad. Why don't you go tell your friend Scott? Oh, you can't. And David said, you better not mention him. It was a whole ordeal. I don't know how we went from that moment to now y'all racing in the pool. Like, I was like, another moment that I forgot to talk about. How David getting suspended from school and sent home and not a single call is made to the mom? That's one thing I know. How ain't a single call made to the mama? You can't suspend nobody from school and send a child home and never tell a parent. That just don't happen. Public school, private school, whatever, prep school, whatever, boarding school, you got to tell a parent. The other thing that I was like, know about that. How did roommate's dad never meet David? Because when they first moved there, don't you find out who your child's roommate is so you know who's sleeping in the same room with your child? Like, isn't that an important part? I'm just saying. I shudder to think that you would have your child at a school where they live on campus and you not have ever laid eyes on your child's roommate. I'm just saying. Anyway, so they end up racing in the pool because they said, oh, yeah, because David said, oh, you're jealous of me. He says it to the roommate, you're jealous of me because I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you at everything. And they were like, you're not in the water. And so they started racing. So it's like neck and neck until David catches the cramp. And now you see him sinking to the bottom. And now, and this is David Makes Man. So part of this is all in David's head, where you see him like he's willingly going to the bottom and just peacefully laying down at the bottom of the pool. And so there's this back and forth where you see old David and young David and old David and young David, and then there's this montage where they fast forward really fast so we can get to David graduating from Hurston and stuff like that. And I really wanted more questions on whether or not he ended the friendship with them and how the rest of his his time in high school went. But we see David graduating, and this, that, and the third, and then we see David and JG while they're packing to move out of the Ville, and JG crying and David telling JG to grow up, and this, that, and the third. So we fast forward and we're back to present time. David is a grown man now, and he wakes up at 3:28 again. Glow is on the phone, and Glow tells him, "You need to get to the hospital now," and it goes off from there. I don't know what they about to do with JG. I don't know. Y'all better not listen. Y'all better not kill off JG. I'm gonna be too outdone if y'all kill off JG. That was David Makes Man. I know these are long, but we're here for it. Shouts out to you all, because all my subscribers that have been rocking with me since season 1, y'all done started coming out of hiding again. Y'all done came out of the bushes. Y'all are commenting, and I love it. Please keep the comments coming. Please keep the commentary coming, because I love y'all comments. I love when y'all correct me. I love when y'all challenge me. I am here for it. So please, let's get down in the comment section and do what we do. Aga about what we saw. That's all I got for y'all this week. I am spent. I am done. I need a glass of water. Until next time, that's all I got for y'all. Thank y'all for coming. Y'all drive safely. I'm out.